Welcome Dr. Chris Davies to our conference. Dr. Chris Davies coordinates the e-learning research group at the University of Oxford, Department of Education, where he's also the course director for the MSc in e-learning. He's also a research associate of the Oxford Internet Institute and a senior tutor of Kellogg College at Oxford. Currently, Chris leads a major research project funded by the BECTA called Learners and Their Context, looking into learners' uses of technology in the home for learning. This is, in fact, as part of the UK government's Harnessing Technology strategy. In his talk, Dr. Davies is going to argue that while not only relatively a small proportion of young people make apparently innovative uses of new technologies for learning, a real and significant change has taken place in how the majority of young people manage their own learning. And he's going to argue that this is all thanks to the widespread availability of broadband connectivity in homes. In his talk, he's going to suggest that while not necessarily fulfilling popular versions of future of learning, these changes that are happening do in fact represent a significant shift in how young people engage with learning. I'm sure Chris's talk is going to be very much linked to, if you have listened to Jilly's address this morning, remember the tree of learning, where she was talking about the informal learning and also young people's learning. So now I hand over the microphone to Chris. We are ready to listen to you.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. I don't know if you can see me as well, but that's not the most important thing on earth. And hello from an extremely cold Oxfordshire countryside. I might or might not freeze to death before the end of this. It's going to be a close call, but very nice to be talking to you. Palitha has sort of introduced the talk very nicely for me. So whilst I don't want to make too much about the notion of has the future arrived, I certainly do think that the starting point is very important. That, you know, we obviously, and I think many people understand this without me needing to tell them, might look for big things to come over the horizon, when actually it's the small increments and the small changes that, as they quietly join together, represent the really significant moments of change. And I think, certainly from the research that I've been involved in the last couple of years and ongoing, that those changes are, my face just seems to have appeared in the middle of the, that's a relief, as the middle of the PowerPoint. I maybe lose my place there, sorry. The things are quietly happening in homes and in the kind of way children learn in homes, which connect with school and connect with other things in their lives that I think are of immense importance. Anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about. And I thought I'd begin with a quote from the past, from 25 years ago, talking about sort of this period now, a book called The Three C's, and it was an interesting notion, but at the end the authors talk about young people actually kind of turning into a new species, Homo sapiens cerebrus, who will survive, prosper, and in due course dominate all those who do not partake of the new intellectual technology. A kind of rather appealingly scary future, but not one that's actually come about, I would say. Maybe a more balanced picture from that period, Alan Kay in 91, both predicting very accurately from that moment of 91, in 10 years, you know, we'd have the internet that we have got, but also saying that instant access to the world's information will probably have an effect opposite to what is hoped. Students will become numb instead of enlightened. Well, I think what I see going on is somewhere between the two. As Palitha said, that the research comes from a project called The Learner in Their Context, which we're doing with BECTA, and the main focus is looking at young people's learners' experiences of using technology in homes and how that relates to their learning. And it's a mixed methods study. There's been interviews, case studies in homes, a large-scale national survey, and that we're looking at learners when we started in the 8-year-olds in primary school up through secondary school, FE, and higher education, going right into sort of young adults. And we're going to go and revisit all of those next year for a final stage. So the argument of this talk, and to break it down slightly more, is that through that home experience of digital technologies, and obviously that is, we mentioned, since broadband became very, very common in homes, at least in sort of about 85% of the homes of young people 2 years ago, and then increasingly so now. Young people have established a range of practices that provide a context for their self-directed learning. And that range of practices is a very important part of the picture. A relatively small proportion of young people through that range develop specialized trajectories of learning, that their personal interests transform their sort of future learning and their future careers. But it is a relatively small proportion in what we have seen. But the learning practices that all young people develop in their own contexts are increasingly dependent on access to especially internet-connected technologies. And that importance is regardless of their personal orientation towards new technologies. Some are very enthusiastic, some want to keep a distance, but they all seem quite dependent. And indeed, some of those practices seem quite familiar and mundane, but then I would say that's how the future usually appears when it arrives. So this picture of young people starts with a sort of picture that has grown up, which is not particularly shocking or surprising. Now, I think it has interested us in the sense of how widespread it was. That really all the young people we've seen, with very, very few examples, engaged in some combination of the following areas of activity with technology. As I say, not particularly shocking and amazing that they do a certain amount of social networking and communication, though a tremendous spread of ways of doing so, not merely through social networking sites. Some prefer texting, some prefer email still. Obviously, some prefer internet chat. But without exception, really, they're all using leisure activities, whether it's TV on demand, watching YouTube, playing online games. Hardly amazing. The creative activities, maybe not as widespread and intensive as one might hope, but they're there. Most using something like messing around with digital cameras and video, photo editing, composing stories, composing music, but a small amount going on, I think, very generally, and within that some degree of schoolwork. Again, that takes us back to some of it seems quite mundane and boring, using the Office suite, using Google and Wikipedia, but very importantly, I think, for them in the sense of feeling some increased degree of control and security in carrying out school tasks. We've sort of been exploring breaking that down a bit in terms of how that spreads out across the sort of population that we're looking at, the sample out of that population we're looking at. Pre-teenage seems to us that there's not a lot of pattern. They're doing different activities in terms of learning to use these resources, learning to get confident with them. There's not a tremendous amount of homework, not a tremendous amount of social networking pre-secondary school age. But once they hit that, and especially around about 12, 13, then that spread of activities, that mainstream spread of activities is extremely common. But there is variation. Some go to even more intensive than that. Some want to express their ambivalence towards it. Some are unconnected. That number is reducing, partly thanks to the government's home access scheme, which does seem to be achieving a fair amount in terms of being able to work towards a goal of 100% of school-aged children being on the internet. Not there yet, but it's moving. But as they grow older, we do see a shift in how that pattern is applied, so that even by the GCSE years, they're beginning, their priorities are more student priorities than teenage priorities, and the emphasis on doing coursework and research for coursework and so on increases, so that by the time they're in FE and then university, the emphasis is far more on activities that will lead towards academic success and then employment. But nonetheless, that same range carries on, except in a few cases where it gets so specialised that takes over. But this is still tentative, but for us, we're trying to make sense of our data by saying